What is the secret to unlocking your full potential? What makes your idols any different than you? How do you become the person you've always wanted to be in life? This is where you get all of your questions answered. My name is Justin Shank, and I sit down with some of the most epic individuals who are changing the world with their actions in business and in life. We discuss how they did it, why they pushed themselves, and more importantly, how they were able to focus on continuous growth to achieve their dreams. Welcome to the Growth Now movement. David brings more than 18 years of product and business development experience from Disney Interactive, Hasbro Interactive, and MicroProse Software to his role as CEO of SavvyCard. David is SavvyCard's primary evangelist and is heavily involved in building strategic relationships with key third-party technology and service providers. Active in the Tampa Bay, St. Petersburg entrepreneurial community as an instructor, mentor, and advocate, David is the member of the board of directors for Tampa Bay Wave, a Tampa-based tech incubator, and is co-chair of their investors relations committee. David, welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, good morning, Justin.
Good morning. So that's a fun little experiment. I just did that live. And as you guys know, and I've talked about this on the podcast, I go way back to the very beginning of never trying a bio live because I tend to mess them up. And so the reason I wanted to do that with David is because I literally read that right off of his SavvyCard. And we're going to get into what this company is and what they do. And it's a great technology for networking and building your business. But before we get there, David, why don't you take a second and tell us a little bit about who you are today?
Yeah, so I grew up on a little farm in West Texas, like 3,000 acres of cotton in cultivation. Wow. And the community that I was in, there were more sheep and cows than there were people. Like, I think the population of the town was like 1,300 people, and there were thousands and thousands of, livestock in the area. So I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and, I'm in my 50s. So that word really didn't even have much meaning back then. You didn't go to school and talk to a career counselor and they said, "Hey, are you considering being an entrepreneur?"
Right.
It was the whole doctor, lawyer, astronaut kind of thing. Those were your career options, or in that particular community, farmer, right? And I couldn't wait to get out of that small town community and get into the technology world. And so sort of my entire personal journey has been about, understanding where technology is going, right? What are the transitions, the technological transitions that are like powering our world, and to try to find ways to be in the middle of that. And so that's sort of who I am. Today, I'm CEO of SavvyCard. I'm heavily involved in the startup ecology in St. Petersburg, Florida. And St. Pete is like this incredible community in Florida for startups, right? It's a beautiful, walkable downtown. There's not a lot of traffic. It's the perfect place when we bring somebody in that we're trying to hire and they spend a couple of days in St. Petersburg, they fall in love with the community and they want to come work for us. So I feel really, really fortunate to have landed in a community that's sort of low cost, high quality of life, and it's sunny year round, beautiful beaches nearby, and that we're building a business that it's easy to get people to want to work for us and to want to move to this area. So that's sort of my life today is really driving SavvyCard as its CEO and working to evangelize the St. Petersburg, Tampa area as a landing spot for technology companies.
No, that's awesome. And so when you were growing up in this farm town, what drew you to technology? Like, was it the boom of that era with computers and all that stuff, or what was it about that drew you in?
So I'm a huge gaming geek, right? And the first time I remember sort of recognizing what a computer was, I went over to a friend's house in this little town, and he had, and I can't remember whether it was like an early, Apple IIe or IIc, or it was a Tandy or something, but one of the first computers, right? And he showed me this game Zork, which was a text adventure, right? And I was like, it blew my mind, right? I think I literally sat down and I was staying over the night, and I think I literally sat down and he fell asleep, and I played the game until the sun came up. It was like such a huge revelation to me that this was possible through that creating stories and interactive experiences through computers was possible. And so it opened up the entire world for me. Particularly since I grew up on a farm that was like 8 miles out of town and my closest neighbor was like 2 miles away. I felt completely disconnected from the world. And then you start hearing about how computers are going to enable people to, connect with each other worldwide and to, create relationships and have conversations, as a global community, which even back then people were exploring how that was going to work. And it just totally transformed my worldview.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love hearing stories of like people that take what ended up being a childhood like passion and things they fell in love with and of wonder, and they make it a career. And obviously not only with your company Savvy Card, but with the positions that you held too, that was in the tech space. Let's talk about that for a little bit. What was that journey like, making sure that you kind of followed that path and followed your purpose to then now be the CEO of your own company?
Well, so it's funny because my first love was theater. Okay. When I went to high school, I dabbled in some sports, but once I sort of, got involved with the theater department at my high school, I knew I wanted to be on stage. Right. And later on, only much later, would I realize that I didn't want to be on stage on Broadway. I wanted to be on stage pitching, investors for technology companies. I wanted to be an entrepreneur on stage, not a performer on stage.
Right.
But even early on, I realized I really liked standing up in front of an audience and sharing, things with them. So my first thought in my career journey was I went through college, musical theater degree, went to Hollywood and tried to make it as an actor for a couple of years, and realized when I got to Hollywood that, there were like 100,000 guys who were better looking, better singers, better dancers, better actors than I was. It's sort of you move your whole world out there thinking that you're going to be able to create a career or start a career. And then you realize that people like Dustin Hoffman took 20 years to break through, and then they made him wear a dress. Right.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It's not easy, right? It's not easy to do that. And while I was out there, I made friends with a guy who was working at Disney Interactive in Burbank, and they were at the very beginning of creating sort of interactive entertainment, right? Computer games and computer education programs. And he said, dude, they're hiring, customer success and quality assurance reps. You should come over and put in an application, right? And I hadn't really thought of going into the computer gaming industry, even though I really loved computer games and was a huge consumer of them. When I got the opportunity to go do that, it just immediately was like putting on a perfectly fitting glove. It was the exact right fit for who I was and what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. And so that started the first part of my career, which was ultimately ended up being an executive producer and designer for computer games. And I got to work with, I think still today, the greatest computer game designer of all time, Sid Meier at Microprose. And so if anybody listening has ever played Civilization, which is one of the most successful game franchises of all time, that's Sid Meier created that. And I got to work with them on Civilization 1 for Windows.
Wow.
And it was just an extraordinary opportunity. So 15, 16 years in the computer gaming industry, developing and designing and managing game development teams. And then the transition to becoming an entrepreneur happened. And I moved out to Silicon Valley right around the first dot-com bust. But that's been the second part of my career is transitioning into building companies and startups and being entrepreneurial.
What was it for you as far as like the pull into entrepreneurship? Like, because everybody has their own reasons, right? Like I got pulled into entrepreneurship because I wanted to create the life that I wanted to live versus what other people wanted me to live. Some people want to build stuff. What was it for you that drew you into entrepreneurship and the stress levels that come with it at times?
Well, I mean, it's not like they tell you about the stress levels, right? You sort of go into it like a lamb to the slaughter. Hey, I'll start a company. This will be fun, right? And then you only realize the stress levels as you begin to execute, right?
Yeah.
But I think back in the beginning, I was drawn to it for a bunch of reasons. So I'd worked at Disney, I'd worked at Hasbro, I'd worked at these sort of, these monolithic huge corporate entities where you feel like you're a cog in the machine. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's really, really difficult to sort of draw a direct line between the work product that you do every day and some type of tangible result. Like, did what I'm working on actually generate, revenue for the company? And was it positive revenue? And it was very, very hard to draw that, make that connection and actually say, hey, what I'm doing is really of value, right? I sort of feel like it might be similar to what some people in the government feel. You work in a government job for 30 years and you're like, am I really doing anything that's meaningful, or am I just shuffling papers, right?
Yeah.
And so I have this sort of deep passion for actually making a difference in some way in the world. I want to, I think all entrepreneurs are driven either by, you can't be driven by money, right? Because 90+% of all startups fail, and it's super hard work and long hours, and there are easier ways to make a living than being an entrepreneur. So the entrepreneurs that I know that are successful are driven by, this ruthless optimism, and it combined with a desire to make people's lives better in some meaningful way, right? Mm-hmm. And if you don't have those two things, the ability to be optimistic in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary, and a powerful desire to build something that improves people's lives, I think you're very likely to fail as an entrepreneur. And so I think the first moment that I decided I was going to start a business was I was working for Hasbro Interactive, and they owned the URL games.com, and they had no idea what to do with it. They were like, what do we do with this URL? And this is back in the early 90s. So it's way before, we saw, gaming networks like Steam and so forth. So people were just trying to figure out, how do we utilize this asset? And is it even valuable, right? Today, we know that a URL like games.com is incredibly valuable.
I couldn't even imagine what that would sell for right now.
Well, I mean, and you think about it, you're talking about Hasbro. Right about this time, Hasbro had acquired Atari. So they had Atari's, total inventory of IP. They had acquired Avalon Hill, which anybody who plays, games is going to remember Avalon Hill fondly. They had all of their, IP inventory, which includes Parker Brothers and things like Monopoly and Scrabble and so forth. So They had these tremendous IP for mobile gaming before mobile gaming was a thing, right? Because what we were realizing back then when we started looking into games.com and how do we utilize this was Hasbro's inventory of interactive games were never going to compete with things like Command and Conquer or World of Warcraft or, these new highly exciting interactive experiences, 3D interactive experiences where you're basically interacting with whole worlds, right? You weren't going to beat that on a console or on a PC with Scrabble, okay? Right. But if you're talking about mobile gaming, then you need to have these experiences that are fast and easy and can be, fully explored on a small screen format device like a smartphone. And so I got to go out to Silicon Valley, and I got to meet with some folks out there who were sort of at the forefront of analyzing what was our world going to look like when mobile phones, which back then were flip phones with like really small, black and white or grayscale displays, when they actually became computers in your hands, right? What was that going to look like?
So back then we just had Snake on the phone. Remember that game?
Yes. Yeah, I do. It was just blocks, right? It was just pixels moving around the screen.
That's it.
And so I got the opportunity to see some early prototypes that were anticipating sort of touchscreen devices, like full color touchscreen devices. This is back in the early 90s, way before the technology existed to be able to actually execute on this, right? But when I saw it, I was like blown away. I was like, in the gaming industry, platform transitions are like gold mines for content developers, right? So when the first Game Boy came out, when the first Nintendo came out, when Xbox came out, when the PlayStation came out, every time there's a technology transition and some new platform comes into the market, the platform is meaningless unless it has extraordinary content, right? Nobody wants to play an Atari game on an Xbox 360. They want to play games that are developed specifically for that new technology. Right. And it's really true of any platform transition. If we're talking about the move from cassette tape to CD-ROMs to DVDs, or we're talking about the move from old style television to cable television to now television on demand. Every time there's a technological transition in terms of consumer technology, there's this huge opportunity to build businesses around delivering content that fully utilizes the new platform. And so when I saw that, first of all, I went back to Hasbro and said, you guys need to get out in front of the mobile gaming revolution before it happens, because all your content is perfect for mobile gaming. And unfortunately, they didn't do that, right? They decided they would just license everything away. But the other thing that happened is I immediately said, I got to get out of corporate, the corporate computer game software industry. And I've got to become an entrepreneur, and I've got to start thinking about what are the businesses going to look like that are going to dominate in this new world that's coming up, where mobile content is going to be, the primary content paradigm for consumers to interact with, the World Wide Web. And so back then in like 94, I started thinking about what that business would look like. And it was not until 2008 when the iPhone actually, took off that it was time to start, to start a business in that area. And that's when SavvyCard was born.
Oh, wow. So you guys have been around since 2008.
Conceptually, right? We started the company in 2012, 2011, 2012, but it was 2008 that we started laying the foundation for it. So yeah, we've been around for like 9 years.
Okay, so let's talk about SavvyCard for a little bit. First of all, it's a phenomenal idea and a phenomenal concept. Where did it come from, and where was it born, and where do you see it going in the future?
So when I was a little kid, I've always been a sports fan, particularly baseball. When I was a little kid, I used to collect baseball cards, right?
Same, man.
And,
we're one and the same. I collected baseball cards as well, and everybody was like, baseball sucks, football's the best. I'm like, no, baseball's where it's at. Still to this day.
Well, I think you have that. It depends on your personality, right? For me, baseball was cool because the statistics were so powerful at analyzing what happened, right?
Yeah.
And predicting future, behavior, right? And I think we live in this world where we see, the money balls, Daryl Morey, what he's doing with the Houston Rockets in terms of like breaking down the entire NBA into a statistical analysis, game basically is extraordinary. Again, this is application of technology to real world problems to create solutions that nobody had ever dreamed of, right? And so back then I was looking at baseball cards and going, I love these because on the front, you got a cool picture to look at, right? If you think of a baseball card as a user interface, right? On the front, you've got this beautiful picture to look at, right? And then you flip it over and there's data. There are tools that you can use to analyze this player. And if you get a collection of all the cards in the league, you can analyze all of the players. And so baseball cards were a precursor to all of the statistical tools that we have out there in the world today, and ultimately it led to DraftKings or whatever, these fantasy sport games that we play today, where we're trying to predict future success using statistics, right?
Right.
So way back then I was looking at and going, this paradigm of having an object, right? A physical object that represents a single player and has their statistical, their historical statistical performance sort of tied to it is really cool, right? It's portable. You can put it in your pocket or put it in a shoebox, carry it with you. You can trade it with other people. It's a conversation starter. The individual objects actually have value and can go up over time. There were just all these fascinating aspects to baseball cards. And ultimately, when I saw the first iPhone and I started thinking about how is content going to get distributed through these, I felt like initially it would be websites, but that they would be a forced fit, that ultimately the way content would be distributed through mobile devices would be through some type of object, like a standalone object that represents an individual thing, right? A business or a person or a product or a service or an event, right? And to me, the perfect paradigm for that was cards. Create a web card instead of websites, which is hundreds of pages. Create web cards for each of the objects that you want to distribute. And then instead of sending people to a URL where they have to dig through all the pages to find what they want, you could say to somebody, hey, you're interested in our product. Let me send you the web card for that product. And it's got everything you need to learn about the product, to educate yourself, to understand other people's experiences with the product, and ultimately to make a purchase decision and to actually purchase if you want to, right? And then once you purchase it, you've got a digital representation of the product that you purchased, which you can store so that you have receipt history, you have information on aftermarket products, you've got a way to reach out to customer support or warranty. Any of the stuff related to your product is all in one place instead of it being stuck in some silo that's sort of difficult for you to interact with, right? And so that was the genesis of SavvyCard. And then from there, it just exploded. Like, the problem we have today is, how do we focus, right?
Yeah.
What do we focus on first? Because we can't build the whole thing all at once.
Sure. And so obviously that's a good problem to have, first of all. So now we're like, oh my gosh, it's going so well. We need to narrow it down and truly focus on it. I know for a while you guys have had a strong focus in the real estate market, which obviously that makes sense, but now you're expanding out of that, correct?
Yeah, we originally developed it as a generic business platform, and then we started realizing, again, one of the most important things that entrepreneurs learn is you have to really focus. You have to know a specific buyer persona for who you're going to be selling your product to. And so, you think of Amazon, for example. Amazon didn't go out and say, we're going to sell everything to everyone in the world right off the bat. That was their long-term goal. But in the short term, they said, we got to dominate one niche with one type of customer persona that we're going after, right? And so they started off by identifying people that love books and who were willing to buy books online, right? And that's where they started, right? And they dominated that space. And then they made logical steps, from books. It was easy to move over to, to movies or to computer games or to music, right? Which are all sort of, directly related to books. And they kept building it out from there. But the whole time they were building out these individual vertical markets, they were building out their technology stack to support the larger goal, which was to ultimately be able to sell anything to anyone, anywhere through the internet, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that's the strategy. When we first built the platform, we needed to validate that we could build the scalable technology that would allow us to build these vertical applications. But after we did that, we had to pick a vertical, and we picked real estate. For better or worse, we picked real estate, and it ended up being a really powerful vertical for us. But I can't wait. I can't wait until next year when we start launching, our business products, and we can start reaching out and getting, hopefully hundreds of thousands or millions of people onto the platform that are not in the real estate space.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about what people can look forward to and kind of how you came up with the new direction as a company?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, just to give people a little bit of context, SavvyCard started off by creating a platform that allows us to build an app for an individual object. And that object could be a person, or it could be a business, or it could be a product, right? And the most obvious application for this for a lot of people is we can build an app for a person that they can use as a replacement for a business card, right? Instead of handing out a business card and sort of giving up control of the opportunity to the prospect, here's my card, I hope you call me, and then letting them walk away, it's obvious that it's a much better strategy to capture their information, to get their name, their email address, their phone number, and then to follow up as quickly as you possibly can. And in today's environment, you want to follow up by text messaging, right? You want to create a conversation through text messaging immediately, but you've got all of these other challenges that you have to overcome. Like, iOS 13 has just put out an update, or Apple's put out an update, iOS 13, that allows you to turn on a privacy setting where if somebody tries to call you and they're not in your Rolodex, they go straight to voicemail. So think about the application of that, or how that impacts the way that we do business today with business cards. Like, you and I meet at a networking event, and you give me a business card and say, I'd love to hear more about SavvyCard. And I go to follow up with you and I call you and I'm not in your address book, it goes straight to voicemail. And now, I mean, I know a lot of people, I call them and their voicemail's full and I can't even leave a voicemail, or I do leave a voicemail and they never call me back, because all they're doing is they're never going to their voicemail and returning those phone calls, right? Right. So there are a ton of challenges related to privacy and the way that people interact today in this environment where half of all phone calls go unanswered because people expect it to be, if it's from an unknown number, they expect it to be, a sales pitch, or they expect it to be a robocall, right? So what we did early on was we said, look, if we can provide an alternative to handing out a business card that is as easy as handing out a business card, but increases your ability to convert those prospects into sales by, 100, 200, 500%, then we believe that we have a product that is truly going to improve the lives of salespeople and small business owners in the marketplace. And so that's sort of the first thesis that we're working against. But longer term, there are all these other benefits of sharing a digital representation of yourself to a customer, including, and this is something that I'm really excited about as well, if that customer meets somebody that needs your service, instead of them scribbling your name down on a napkin or just saying, hey, you should call David at SavvyCard, they're able to actually pass that SavvyCard, that digital object, as a referral, and it creates origination, and it allows us to teach our referral partners how to refer us in a way that we can follow up to that referral in real time within seconds of the referral being passed. So the digital business card is sort of the tip of the spear. We have hundreds of applications for SavvyCard that are behind that, all of which we think are going to improve the way that sales and business are done in almost any industry.
I love all that. And it's so true too. Actually, as you were talking about people leaving voicemails, I immediately delete them thinking, I don't even listen. And I immediately delete them thinking it is some sort of sales call or robocall, because you can kind of read the transcripts now. They're really badly transcribed, but on the iPhone, and it'll be like your social security number. I'm like, clearly this is scam. Like I've been going to jail by the FBI 9,000 times a day lately.
Right.
Just crazy stuff. But it reminded me that I got a voicemail from a number I didn't know that I do have to call the guy back. But anyway, that's the world we live in, right? And so it's easy for me to put that to the side. And it's not that I didn't want to hear from that person. It's that once you leave that transaction, you almost forget until you're reminded. And obviously SavvyCard's a great response to that. And I've been networking for, I'm 35 now. So I've been networking pretty consistently for a lot of years in my life, almost 20 years. And when I look at how that has grown, I mean, I think this is the answer to the next wave. I mean, I think it's a brilliant idea. And then, like you said, then there's more business applications to be put into that. Now, as an entrepreneur, excuse me, kind of battling a cold right now. Now, as an entrepreneur, as you're scaling and growing this business, what obstacles are you seeing, and what tips would you give somebody who's ready to scale and kind of pivot their business a little bit? How can they approach and kind of almost, what's the word I'm looking for? Almost like know where the market's going. I feel like you're a step ahead. Like, is that a gift, or is that something you're learning?
So, I mean, there's a lot of thought, thinking around whether or not you want to be out in front of the market or you want to be just in time or what have you. My personal belief is if you're just in time, you're too late, right? That there are technology companies out there that are so well funded, that are so powerful, right? That if you're not well ahead of a market opportunity, and if you haven't already established technological infrastructure and, if possible, IP, patents, and trademarks, and if you haven't already created sort of a volume of thought leadership content around the space and so forth, if you're an entrepreneur and you're just in time, like somebody announces, hey, the time for digital business cards is here. It's now, right? You see an article in the Wall Street Journal, right? And they make a compelling case for why that is. And you're like, we just started our company and we're right on top of this. You're probably 4 years or 5 years too late, right? Mm-hmm. Because whatever your idea as an entrepreneur is, it's going to be sort of obvious, I think, at that point to a lot of other companies that are in your space that are going to be your competitors that have a lot more resources to get to market before you can. So I tell people, I tell entrepreneurs that I mentor or coach, you need to be looking for blue ocean opportunities. And there's a great book about, sort of blue ocean, business thinking. But you need to be looking for blue ocean opportunities and establishing your competitive moat around that marketplace, well in advance of it being obvious to the rest of the world that it's a thing, right? That it's a viable marketplace. And if you don't, you better get out there and partner with somebody that has the muscle and the capital and the resources to go very, very fast once, that market emerges. So that's probably the best advice that I would have as it relates to timing.
Dude, that's awesome. I love that. And so obviously with this podcast, I get the opportunity to talk to some incredible people that others and even themselves consider themselves successful. So my question for you is, what is your definition of success? And what are 3 things you do every single day to ensure that success for yourself?
Well, so I'm going to have to give you 2 definitions of success. One is personal success, and the other one is success in my capacity as CEO and founder of a company, right? So personal success to me is that you go home every night or wake up every morning and you go, I love what I'm doing, right? It's hard, right? But I love what I'm doing. If you're waking up every morning and you're going, I feel like I'm compelled to continue on this path, but I hate it. This is not what I want to be doing. Then you're not successful, right?
Right.
So I know a lot of people who, they're not rich. They don't have, they don't have a unicorn, right? They're not being invited to fly out to, trade shows and stand up on stage in front of thousands of people and tell their story and stuff, but they're happy, right? They get up every morning and what they're doing fulfills them, right? That's a personal decision that you have to make about what fulfills you, but it's very, very simple. You wake up in the morning and you go, am I excited to be doing what I'm doing today? And if the answer is yes, then that to me is success, right? As far as the CEO of a company or CEO of a startup, success is providing a acceptable return to your investors, right? That's it. That's all that it is. So you got to marry those 2. You've got to figure out how you can get up every morning and say, I love what I'm doing personally. And then you got to walk into the office and you got to realize that even though the myth is that as an entrepreneur, you're working for yourself, you're not. You're working for your shareholders. It's no different than if you were a public company, right? And the sooner that somebody realizes that they work for their shareholders, for their investors, the easier it's going to be for them to get aligned with what's in the best interest of the company, right? I see so many companies fail because there's this constant tension, this constant, conflict between the investors who are investing money and the goals and desires of the CEO and management, right? And the CEO and management, they have to understand that a part of their day-to-day responsibility is making sure that their investors are aligned with where they're going and what their ideas are. You got to be collaborative there, because if you're not, unless you're wildly successful like Zuckerberg, you can basically tell everybody, I don't care what you think because I'm super successful, which is a tiny, 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 tiny fraction of all businesses.
Right.
For everybody else, you need the support of your investors on a day-to-day basis. And so that to me, success is that I can pick up the phone and call any of my investors and have them say, what do you need? What can I do to help? Do you need cash? Do you need advice? Do you need introductions? That they're so invested in the business and they're so well versed in what we're doing, and they believe in me and my team to the extent that I can call them up and ask for something and they say yes. That's success to me as a CEO.
I love all of that. And obviously, this conversation has been incredible. I love talking to other entrepreneurs who are forward thinkers, who are building the future, not only for themselves, but really for the world. And so I wrap up every single episode with one question. But before we get there, David, the more important question is, how do people get a hold of you? How do they get a hold of this amazing product? What's all the good stuff?
Yeah, so it's funny because, like I said, we're going to be rolling out our Savvy Card for Business offering sort of next year. We're doing some pilots, but we're going to do our big push probably in February or March of next year. So a big part of what I like to do is I like to talk to prospective customers and understand, do they believe in the value proposition that we're selling? And so anybody that's listening to this podcast that thinks that Savvy Card might be useful to them as a business owner or as a salesperson, I'd like to invite them to call me directly, because I'd love to hear their thoughts, and it'll help to inform, how we decide to take the product to the market. So I'm a big believer in eating your own dog food, which is a horrible phrase, but it really is. It's a really powerful phrase to sort of understand and embrace. It just means use your own product, right? And so I'm the number one user of the SavvyCard product. I have more usage than anybody else on the system, right? And I use it as a salesperson daily, and it's powerful. It really, really helps me in my business. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite anybody that's interested in learning more, or potentially purchasing our product, or potentially partnering with us. Get my SavvyCard, and I'll tell you how to do it in a second, and call me or email me or text me and reach out, and I'd love to build a relationship with your listeners and use them as sort of an ad hoc user group to help me understand, are we on the right track with our product or not? So here's how you get a hold of me. If you Google search my name, David Etheridge, and it's spelled ETHEREDGE, all E's, my SavvyCard comes up number one for my name, above LinkedIn and Facebook. Just click on the link and call me or text me or email me. Alternatively, there's a cool feature in SavvyCard that allows you to share your card to an audience, and I'll use it right now. If you text the word David to 72889, you'll get a text with the link to my SavvyCard, right? And so I want to test whether or not, our product is useful or useful to your listeners. And I think this is the best way to determine that. If I get 0 phone calls, then that sort of is a referendum on whether or not SavvyCard is a valuable product. If I get 100 phone calls, then that's going to be an exciting problem to sort of dig through. So anyway, that's what I would love for people to do. Reach out, talk to me directly. I'd love to build a relationship with your listeners.
Yeah, I love that. And I encourage you guys, please reach out to David, not only from the standpoint to help him with what he's trying to do and for him to get feedback, but also for you guys just to connect with somebody who thinks on this level. I'm a big proponent, and everybody who listens to the show knows this. I'm a big proponent of building strong relationships and connections with people that, empower me, people that can help me. And this is an opportunity for you to connect with somebody who clearly understands the world of entrepreneurship, and it might be somebody that you can build a great relationship with. So I encourage you, please reach out to David. And then all they have to do is text David to 72889, which is such a great feature. And then all your information pops up, which I absolutely love. So David, before we wrap everything up, like I said, I finished with every single, with the last, I can't even talk today. This is what happens when you have a cold, people. By the way, I don't edit any of this stuff out. It's a beautiful thing. My brain is just not working. The Mucinex is killing me right now. But I wrap up every single episode with this one question, since it is called the Growth Now Movement. The question is, in your life, what has been your biggest moment of growth?
Wow, biggest moment of growth. It's funny. It's happening right now. And it's really interesting, right? Scaling this company is the hardest thing I've ever done. Okay, it's the hardest thing I've ever done, and I think that as an entrepreneur, you really need to be able to say, right now, I'm doing the hardest thing I've ever done, right? Because otherwise, you're not growing, right? I mean, in 12 months or 18 months, my hope is we're going to raise a big capital round, and we'll be scaling the company, in an order of magnitude faster than we are today. And that'll be the biggest moment of growth in my career, right? But right now, the biggest moment of growth in my career is happening right now because some of my investors have gotten heavily involved in mentoring me as a CEO so that I can take the transition from being a CEO of a startup to a CEO of a scaling enterprise, right? And so my career, I've never done that before. So I am learning more and faced with more new challenges today than I've ever faced before. And my investors are challenging me. I mean, they're really aggressively challenging me to grow and to improve my capabilities and to change my thinking and to communicate all of that through my organization, to lift up the entire organization with me as that happens, right? And it's the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's also the most rewarding thing I've ever done. So I think today is the biggest growth challenge I've ever faced, and tomorrow will probably be a new record for that. And hopefully, 6 months from now, you ask me then, I'll say, I'm continuing to be challenged at a level that's greater and greater every day.
I love that. And it's the greatest, example of what entrepreneurship is. David, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your message and your journey with us through building this incredible company. And, I look forward to staying connected and seeing where this goes.
Awesome. Justin, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. And thank you for your listeners. Appreciate your time as well.
Thank you guys so much for being a part of the Growth Now movement. This is how you can really help me out. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please share it out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that fun stuff. And let's grow this movement to epic heights. And it's all going to be because of you guys. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.